Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world you may happen to be. You're tuned into Clock Tower Advisors Talk About Your Community. And I'm Todd, your host. I hope that you had a wonderful week. If you are tuning in for the first time, welcome. This is a show about community building, whether online, in person, or offline, or the hybrid of the two, my favorite. And my guest today is definitely living in both of those worlds, and I'm looking forward to her insights and the conversation that's going to come out of today's meeting. This video live stream podcast is something that we put on every other week on Friday mornings, at least Friday morning Central Time here in the United States. 10 o'clock here. I know it's getting into evening in Europe and some of my friends further across the globe. But if you've taken the time to come here and tune in, thank you so much for making time in your day. These streams generally last about 30 minutes to 45 minutes, just enough to kind of squeeze in a little inspiration into your day. Hey, hello, Fatima from Barcelona. So great to see you. Thank you for tuning in. Would love to know where you're from. Love comments. Try to pay close attention to whoever's offering their ideas. I know I posted before we started the stream that Marta and I are going to be talking about architecting these meaningful community experiences. So I was interested if you've ever participated in a co-working space. I know I have in some of the past places where I've lived, particularly down in Milwaukee and down in Chicago. I've worked in and been a subscriber to co-working environments, and I find them very energizing. I think they're really terrific experiences. They're great places to build that sense of community connection. So would love to hear about your experiences as we get into the conversation today. Any questions that you may have, we may promote them into the screen here and share them, as more for Marta and I to talk a little bit about. So my guest today is Marta Rocamora González, and she is the CEO of Ground In. And I'm just going to go ahead and bring her on the screen here, and please everybody give her a warm welcome. Hello, Marta.
Hello, everybody.
So nice to see you. Now, where in the world are we talking to you from today?
So today we're in Dominican Republic. I'm actually in Cap Cana, so very close to Punta Cana, where we're visiting a client that we're helping with a co-working space, actually.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So I never know quite where in the world you are, because you've worked in so many different places. You set up these shared spaces, these community spaces throughout the world. So it was one of the reasons I was so excited to talk to you after we had our first connection, maybe a couple of months ago, I think, and talked a little bit about what you do. I would be remiss if I didn't start out by saying congratulations on your recent marriage.
Thank you.
I think that's so wonderful. Now you said before we got onto the stream, you mentioned that you guys haven't set up a honeymoon yet, but that's coming up maybe in 2023, right?
Exactly. In 2023, we hope to visit Mexico. We both haven't been there. We were considering also Southeast Asia, but I've been quite a bit, so we wanted a place that none of us knew. So hopefully that's where we will head.
So great, so great. Well, why don't we start out? I always ask people a little bit about their origin stories, how they fell into the community space, because it's not something that there's a formal educational background to get. Like maybe you came in through sociology or some other kind of course of study at the university, but there's no community major for somebody to specialize in. And here you are as the CEO of Ground In, which is. I love the quote about this in your profile. It's business growth driven by community, grounded in the art of shared spaces. I love that so much. So tell me a little bit about how you got to where you are here today.
Okay, so just to share a bit about my background, I'm actually Spanish, but grew up in France in an international school. So I've always had to be mixing different cultures and seeing the difference, that does coming from one culture or another. So community and getting into new cultures has always been very present. Then I made the choice of actually did my studies in Montreal, which already a very interesting city that mixes, the Francophonie, the English speaking. Was fortunate to study at McGill, which is a campus that is downtown, which is not what is common normally. So you're always in that hybrid space between the student community, but also the professionals that are living there. And then I had the luck of working in advertisement. I worked for Cirque du Soleil. I worked for a company called C2 Montreal, which the whole focus was in building bridges between different communities of professionals and really bring commerce and creativity to meet one another. And not to spoil, but then I worked at WeWork for almost 5 years, opening spaces around the world, and I guess. What kept on being the pattern is in the business world, the more people were focusing on building, strong organizations, strong cultures, strong communities, the more things felt being more aligned, easier to work. People felt, they were having meaningful, fulfilling work. And I guess that's how it started growing inside of me more and more. Hey, something that I'm passionate about is actually, proving to be very needed right now more than ever. And I guess when COVID hit, it switched from just being something that happens to people being much more intentional about the design of doing that. And I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur, so decided to launch my own agency now a little bit over a year ago, which is grounding. So yeah.
That's amazing. Well, and certainly after my own heart, being entrepreneurial, starting new businesses, running your own ship is full of all kinds of worries and fear, but it's also a joyful experience at the same time. Really cool. I think I really like the way that you articulated, how you fell into community, because I think that that's an experience for so many of us who end up in this space because we're doing those activities that create that sense of community, and then you suddenly realize, oh, there's a profession involved with this. I was talking to one of my colleagues, Carolyn Zick. Hey, Carolyn, if you're out there. We were having, a very, very similar kind of conversation. There's the moment, she went to a conference after, I think soon after the pandemic was kind of winding down a little bit. I don't think we're out of it, certainly, but she had that experience of sort of recognizing oh, this is a thing. There's a profession, built around this whole space. So it's really wonderful to hear about. Now, I am so fascinated that you get to work with both Cirque du Soleil and NASA. I mean, how did those things happen? I mean, I think Cirque du Soleil was first for you, correct?
Yes. No, I was fortunate, first of all, because the headquarters of Cirque du Soleil happens to be in Montreal. It was in the company that I was working before, the one that I was mentioning, C2. I was really backed by Cirque du Soleil and providing that business conference that was very different. We were focusing so much on the space, bringing that importance of how people meet with one another and how it could ignite different conversation. That we're fortunate that the Cirque could, on top of it, really make sure that we're designing accordingly. So that's how I got to meet the Cirque du Soleil team. And I was very fortunate that the head of creativity back then, Welby Altidore, we were in a different conference in New York. We started to talk a little bit, and at that moment he was looking for a creative assistant to help, and I was bring me in. I would love to see the world from inside. It was such an amazing organization, what they've been able to do to disrupt completely the industry and build that brand globally. So that's how I started working. How I started working with the Cirque du Soleil.
And what exactly did you do for them?
So I was the assistant of the head of creativity. So a little bit of everything, really. It was from helping the conceptualization of new shows. Right now, the one that is running that we work on was Lucia. And also there was an adaptation back then of Avatar that we're working closely with James Cameron, and it was a very interesting time because my period there was short but very 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 intense, because it was right at the moment where they were changing really the ownership of the company. So it was right when investment from outside was taking over, so a bit of a shift of culture from being so creative driven to maybe finances taking over. So yeah, that's.
Did you get a chance to interact directly with some of the artists and the creatives that were performing?
Yes,
Oh,
yes,
that had to be so neat. Yeah.
and really all the shows like they're done in the headquarters in Montreal, so they have the space. Like artists stay there, training, really getting to know one another. So you can like when you're going for lunch, you can see them, in their natural habitat, trying to practice their art. So it's
So
quite
neat.
quite inspiring.
No, I have to ask if you worked with them some years ago. Have you maintained some ties with them? Like, can you basically go and say like, oh, by the way, I'm Marta. I used to work with you guys, and they'd like give you like a free pass to walk into any of the shows?
I don't know if I have a free pass to work in any of the shows at all. But the person that I had the most contact with, well, be actually shortly after, like he had been working for almost 15 years, and he decided to leave shortly after I left as well, and wrote his own book called Creative Courage. And actually, that's just coming out to me right now. It's the first time that someone recognized the community spirit within me. Like in the acknowledgement, he was going about like the different people, that inspired him to write, and that's when he was like, "Hey, for the spirit of community." I was like, "Oh, I never thought that that's what was coming across," because the word community, I guess, in the profession it's still very out there. But yeah, so he's no longer there, but definitely through him, we could get new contacts. If you want to get some other people in the show, be happy to do intros.
Yeah, we'll talk after the show. That sounds so cool. Thank you for that. And for those of you who tuned in, Marta Rocamora González is the CEO of Ground In. We're going to be talking about architecting meaningful community experiences. So, stick with us. We're just kind of doing the preliminaries here to get to know each other a little bit. But I know you've worked on a number of different kinds of projects, but one of the other ones that really stood out in your background on LinkedIn was work that you did with NASA. What was that all about?
Yes. So, I mean, when it sounds like NASA, it sounds like it is the actual organization. This is actually the NASA Space Apps, which basically is the largest hackathon worldwide. So it's something that they put out now a couple of years ago, where the idea was like, how can we bring more accessibility to what's happening in NASA's projects? Because sometimes people think of NASA and it seems like literally like rocket science, right? Like something that might be like very far, not something that we can all relate to. And so through this program, basically it's a hackathon that happens at the same time all over the world in different cities. So over 2 days, we bring multidisciplinary teams to try to answer a couple of challenges that NASA is proposing. So they spend a couple of months creating over 22 different challenges. And then teams come, in this case, we did it in Barcelona. It was the first time. We actually have 2 finalists. So we hope that we're going to go see a rocket launch.
Nice.
And so the idea is to really bring multidisciplinary teams and all ages. So you can have students up to professors mixing and trying to solve that challenge. You don't necessarily have to have technical skills. You don't have to be a developer or coder like majority of hackathons tend to be. Of course, it helps, for whichever product that you're trying to build. But you can bring your storytelling, you can bring your artistic side, illustration, and yeah. So we help them in organizing actually this hackathon. Been involved now. It was the first year bringing it to Barcelona, but we've been bringing it to Spain now for almost 3-4 years with another partner called Emotion Hack. So. Yeah.
So neat. Well, it's such amazing diversity of experiences you've had that all makes you a better community builder, I'm sure. So just wanted to acknowledge a couple of comments that came up in the chat. Fatima Duarte said hello from Barcelona. I don't know if that's a friend of yours, but wonderful to see you here. Tim McDonald said that he actually co-worked in New York City for about a year and now is living in Tampa. Because I'd asked, what was your experience with co-working? I'd love to hear from others in the chat as well. And then Anizuddin, you were asking about a hiccup in the streaming content. I don't know if anybody else is. It looks clean from our side, so hopefully your signal clears up here pretty soon. Marta, I feel like I've spent like a lot of my career doing either live event kinds of experiences or building communities in an online context that have maybe an in-person component, like a conference or some kind of event, kind of piece. But you've been building these co-working spaces or these shared work kinds of
Yeah.
environments, and then there's maybe an online component to those as well. Can you talk a little bit about some of the considerations for designing online and offline, that sort of that hybrid, kind of world? And like, what do you build first? What comes first, the online or the offline? It's like, how has that worked in your experience?
That's an excellent question. Um, I think it depends on the business that we're working with. Depends on like the project that they want to build, also the budget they have with, because we've had the experience of normally building first offline, so like the analog building the space, and then around designing all the space we start to design a community, and then the digital aspect is actually the layer that is going to power and make it accessible for more people that are not necessarily able to come physically, or even if they come physically, that they can interact in other forms, right? And we're very lucky that I think now we're in that interesting point where the technology is becoming more accessible. There's more like no code. There's more platforms that allow for this community exchange to happen. So we tended to build more offline first, but then now, especially COVID, has made us realize that a lot of the spaces that were shared could not be shared anymore because of the restrictions, and so the online started to take a major role as well, to even justify like where to go next, in terms of expansion or scale, or what is the niche that has an interest. So we're focusing as well sometimes in starting with online, and then once there is an enough critical mass, then it makes sense to start to build physical spaces that foster and support that community that is happening online. So I guess not an easy answer, but like depends for each case. But either way, there
That,
is always, yeah. Go ahead.
yeah, no, that doesn't surprise me at all. I
Yeah.
think that makes perfect sense. Excuse me. I shared
Speaking
before.
of food, right?
I'm still recovering from being sick a little bit. So that is fascinating. What about get my voice back here? I lost my voice for a second. As far as setting up those shared spaces in live analog environments, what's your experience with setting them up in different places around the world? Like you've set up places in UAE and in Canada, in Spain, variety of different cultures and locales. When you're setting up those spaces, what are the considerations from a localization standpoint that you pay attention to?
I mean, they're the obvious ones of the legal aspect, depending on which country you might be opening, especially when it comes to like co-working space or even co-living. That there's different legislations that you have to take into consideration on
Mhm.
what can you actually do. Like sometimes with certain clients that they, especially if they're building new purpose, that they're not refurbishing something existing, you think you have like the white canvas where you can do everything that you want, and everything is possible, but then reality always comes to ground the ideas into what are the legislations of the country, what are the policies that let you have maybe the square meters per person that is feasible or not, no matter how much you might interact with the regulator and explain that the space is not always used with the number of people that are actually connected or so on. There might be certain regulations and countries that are more open or less to what the proposition is. So that's always going to depend on the countries. And then despite that, there is the cultural aspect. So for instance, when we're opening spaces in South Africa, for instance, security became also a more important component. Like we were used maybe to build certain spaces that were very welcoming for the outside. In other countries, that you can open retail space and have that like open door policy. And maybe in certain other countries, you need to be a bit more conscious that the members of this space, they want to make sure that their belongings and themselves are safe in a different manner. So security becomes an issue of how do you make sure that it's still welcoming and open to create that community environment that you want to, but at the same time that you're protecting the people that are inside as well. So that's just like so small examples, but you have to adapt depending on where you're at, and it's not only countries but cities. It's not the same to be in Madrid than to be in Barcelona. People interact differently, and culturally is a different game.
That's very interesting. Well, and I know like there are different perceptions about even what online community is between the U.S. and the EU, even as far as like how they're adopted, how they're used, and I'm sure when you get down to a much more local level, there may be a healthy distrust of online communities versus versus the in-person spaces where I can meet you face to face and I kind of know who you are and I get what it's about. One of the things about building out physical spaces for co-work and for promoting chance meetings and interactions and collaborations in the spaces that you're creating. I've been thinking about that increasingly as I expect that the central metaphor for online communities is going to be changing in the next couple of years. I think forever it's been that online communities are these text-based kinds of experiences. You've got a discussion forum, you've got a Slack channel, but now we're seeing some interesting evolutions based on the availability of broadband to people where we can have video-based communities. Like there's Volley or volleyapp.com, which is asynchronous video conversation. You've got things like LinkedIn Audio, where you can have just sort of impromptu audio conversations and sessions. You've got virtual reality or augmented reality kind of setups that maybe blend real, in person and virtual, but that I think those are increasingly ways of thinking about online community that are, I would call them architectural in nature. It's like planning spaces. What is the entry space when I come in? It's no longer just this weird looking discussion forum list of topics. It's an entry hall. And like, I'm a little bit of an architecture buff, at least enough to, to kind of pay attention to spaces, when I walk into an environment and see what it is. I'm a fan of Frank Lloyd Wright's architecture and sort of how, like, when you walk into Frank Lloyd Wright's houses or his structures, it's usually sort of like this smaller entrance or this low ceilinged entrance place, and you walk in and you walk into the main space and it opens up, and there's a psychological effect to doing those kinds of things. I'm wondering, what lessons can you teach us about designing those physical spaces that we need to be thinking about as we design the virtual?
I think like the physical space allows for a moment to pause and reflect, right? Because when you're about to like launch any like construction project, like it tends to involve like a budget that is significant enough that you want to stop and plan and strategize, right? So there is room for designing, which often maybe in tech, because we don't see the cost maybe as in front, or we think, hey, we can do quickly the first MVP and then we'll build from there. We tend to be a bit more scrappy on our approach, whereas in the physical world, there is that invitation to pause and reflect. And I think that's one of the major lessons when thinking of building, constructing communities, is it is a design process. It is a human experience, and it's a journey that you want to take, people that want to be part of their community. So whether you're thinking about like, what's the objective? What are these people gathering for, right? It's not a one event thing, it's a repeated experience. So why should we be creating this bond and this link on the first place? How are you setting the tone, right? How people are being onboarded? So like you were mentioning right now, like the entry points, whether it's in digital, like, hey, how do you have the first experience with this community? How do you do that first impression? It's gonna matter, and we really think about it in the physical space. So like basically like from the onboarding to the offboarding to like the experience itself, the rituals, but also all the structure of, hey, how online it would be like data management, how we're thinking about, the operations, where is the team that is behind, facilitating this online community or this physical one, right, that are hosting, that are doing the hospitality aspect. All of this requires some time of designing, reflection, pause, and then from there you can start to build that roadmap and build. I think that's the biggest lesson that I could come up right now.
I think it's a great lesson. And I mean, I wasn't even thinking like offboarding as well. Like, at what point does somebody leave that communal space, and what is their experience when they leave that space? I feel like this is room for growth for online community spaces, because as I think about the various platforms that are out there, certainly you've got the ability to brand them with logos and colors, and what the branding is, for that organization. But where's the emotion of that experience? Like, to me, it seems like we're, and this is not the fault of the platform providers. I think it's just the nature of how these community platform experiences have expressed themselves over decades now. And it's all this accumulated expectation. But in effect, depending on which platform you're buying, it's like the equivalent of buying a Taco Bell that you're slapping your own logo on, right? And like, come on in and do this thing. But like, I'm excited about sort of new ways of thinking about community that involve being deliberate in the same ways that you describe it, because as you said, it really counts when you are building this place. You can't just do an MVP. You've got to plan what the architecture of that space is going to be, and maybe limited budget for updating or modernizing that experience over time. I'm pretty excited about that. I think that the opportunity to really engage emotion with the architecture of the community is such a powerful lesson. And it was one of the reasons I was just so excited to have you on, because I know you're thinking about this on a regular basis. So do you have any tips for sort of that onboarding experience, when you're introducing people to the new physical shared space environment? Like, what is it that makes that a good experience?
Yeah, if I may, even before I answer that, because what you were saying right now is like, I think it's also because the timing that we're starting to recognize, when like you were saying at the beginning, hey, there's no like community degree right now that you could be taking, right? Right now it's the starting of recognition of community as a profession, and that is multidisciplinary, right? Like, now you're gonna have coders that are gonna code with community in mind, which maybe before they were just coding to do the website or to do the platform itself. But it's very different to approach with the angle of, hey, this is what we're building, and we're only focused on doing these kind of online experiences, whether it's the metaverse or whichever new platform that hasn't been created yet. So we're in that interesting moment where skills and intention and emotions are starting to meet, and that's very exciting. I think there's lots that can be done.
It's beautifully said. Yes.
Yeah. And we hope like very much that the profession of community builders and community managers, and I know we're a lot in this industry, being a bit like the pioneers of saying, hey, we're gonna help to like recognize all the effort, because many times when we're talking about a profession, people still don't understand very much what it means, how to measure it, what are the metrics, right? So we're talking about emotions, but if we don't have the metrics, then it's hard to like justify the return on investment and like how to keep on going with that side. But if we start to only talk about that, then we lose the emotional aspects. It's all about that balance. And then tips on onboarding in general, I think is to recognize first that is one of the most important aspect of what you're going to be doing. Of course, like offboarding is going to matter and so on, but setting the right tone at the beginning, setting the expectation, it's essential. And I think that's really done one person at a time, in a way. Like community, like sometimes we always think about the groupal communal relation, but it's also very much a one-to-one experience that you do, and then you get to do matchmaking, and then everybody gets to know one another and so on. But we have to like think of like that first experience of someone coming as an individual, and getting to know a group of people, getting to know a way of doing things, and so depending on the complexity of what you're trying to offer, how do you approach that first impression? Is it something that they can digest on their own before coming? Is it like a checkbox that they need to fulfill in order to feel like, okay, I'm contributing or a part of this, I'm introducing myself. It's gonna again depend on what you're trying to build, but it's really essential.
Can you tell me? I'll put you on the spot here a little bit if I can. It's okay if you don't have an example, but can you tell me about a time when you felt like that onboarding, maybe it was just a one-on-one with somebody, when it really clicked for you? Is there sort of like a shining example in your imagination of when this has happened for you in the past? Because I often find for people it's sort of a light bulb moment, for somebody.
Yeah, I mean, the last like meaningful corporate, if we're onboarding that it was with the WeWork. So in a sense, the first week of experience of joining the organization was very much focused on like learning about just the culture of the organization first. Getting the time of like being in a cohort with other people that were going through the similar challenges of just being new, and it didn't matter whether you were someone that was going to be at the front desk or whether you were the new VP of whichever department. We're all put in the same same entry level, same entry point of where the key values that were important. Back then it was like we were less than 1,000 employees, but I really believe that experience really marked that everybody was passionate and was clear on what we were trying to achieve, and each one did its own thing, but I thought that really clicked on setting the tone, and that really marked me. I've had other onboarding experiences with the companies where it's not almost acknowledged that you're new into the organization. There's not even like, when is the ramp up expected? Or it's like, hey, here's a bunch of information, and you figure out like where to find things.
Sure. Yeah. No, I love that. That's really terrific. So I've got we had a nice question from one of our guests here, Don Griffin. Don is actually a colleague of mine from Rotary. He's part of the district that I belong to. So he says, full disclosure, I'm a boomer with millennial tech adoption. What strategies do you suggest for those who feel online engagement is vastly inferior to the impersonal experience? I just had this experience yesterday with a local business organization that I'm active with. They just love the in-person better. But then how do you encourage them to be part of that online world of it too? Or do you bother?
It's a tricky one. To be fair, like that, even ourselves, like we position like as grounding, like our position is first, to like start with the real life experiences, of course in the shared spaces, but in general, because it's the moment you meet in person, there's so much more that happens. Right? Like you feel the energy, the connection, and it's totally different. I think the key of like why we should, also elevate those interactions with online is to start to recognize a bit more the operational aspect that can bring you. So there's that component of like asynchronous, the facility of like, hey, self-paced, that you're connected based on your own moment. So like you have to show the benefits of being online as well, that are very different to the benefits that you would have in a one-to-one, in a real life experience. But that language needs to be developed so it's clear that there are benefits that are different. And until we don't show that, it's going to be hard for anybody to adapt. Like, why should I go into a platform if there's no return? Yeah.
And I think that's exactly that's really on the money in my experience. What you're saying, and I think sort of making it clear, like what's in it for me to be a part of that, and how is it different from that in person? These are not the same thing. They're not equivalent experiences, nor will they probably ever be. I think some of the barriers to online interaction, like the video that we're able to interact now from miles and miles and miles and miles apart, across the globe here, is certainly something that kind of breaks down those barriers. But it's another benefit. Like although I may never meet you face to face, we're able to form a friendship and have interactions and have a rich exchange of ideas here that we'd never be able to do in an in-person kind of environment, very, very likely. So not to say that I would love to meet you in person, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And the volume is also something, because sometimes people ask like, what's the volume of a community, that makes sense. And it's true that with online you can play with like maybe having thousands of members, and you're saying, okay, but maybe not building those strong bonds or relationships with everybody. But then you do have access, like maybe when you have a question, of having people that are always there to be able to respond, right? And you might not have that if you had like a small, intimate, curated, physical community. So again, depends what you're trying to achieve and which one matches what you need most.
Absolutely. So, so let's turn the conversation a little bit to what's inspiring you right now. Like, what are there conversations about community, or are there other kinds of topics that you're drawing energy or strength from yourself right now?
I mean, to be fair, what I'm very excited is to start to see and connect more with like community professionals in general. I mean, to be fair, like we're fairly new as a young company. So like you were saying, like there's all the emotional roller coaster of like kicking off and starting, and we've been doing a lot of work that was like centered on building communities for others, and now we're starting to be like, oh, we can also build for ourselves. And sometimes it's harder to do it for your own self than you're doing it for others. So I mean, I'm very excited to start to be able to have these conversations, to be able to participate into like creating these professions. So that to me excites me, and I really believe that's the future of our business. So yeah, like just like being able to interact with LinkedIn and exploring online in this matter, I think it's brilliant.
There's so much good interaction available on LinkedIn in particular.
Yeah.
That's really great to hear. And in fact, you had mentioned that you're planning to be launching a community for community professionals. Now, is that Spanish language first? Is that how
Yeah,
you
so
guys
we're
planning?
going to link it with a small course, crash course on how to design, your first community as well. So we're going to be offering first in Spanish, but we're also going to be doing in English later on. So it's multicultural, like we like to keep it. But yeah, it's going to be a community for professionals, community professionals actually.
Nice. And and it's nice to have those kinds of places to interact and learn from each other, and and build a little bit. I know you may think that your noise level is bad in the background. It's not bad.
Okay,
You're
perfect.
fine.
Just gonna
Yeah,
have people speaking.
it just sounds like a cafe.
Okay,
It's
perfect.
kind of a neat feel. So that's really cool. And then you mentioned there's also going to be a free guide for community that you're
Yes.
offering as well. Okay.
So no, like I believe like there's so much free information, playbooks that are being shared, which I find is fantastic, and we just want to be able to contribute. So all of our learnings that we had during this year, we conducted a little bit of a market research, different interviews with people that are leading in different industries, and we just want to be able to do like our summary and share it. So it'll be coming out either next week or the week after, and our intent is really to keep on being evidence based and share like our learnings with the rest of the world. So it will be our first one, but hopefully not the last one.
Well, that's so great. I mean, I think the exciting thing for me is just seeing that that Ground In is really about building those shared spaces and having the online component of them as well. I've been involved, as I shared at the beginning of the stream, with some other co-working kinds of spaces. When I was living in Milwaukee, there was a really neat business lounge that was a co-working facility you could buy a membership to and be involved with, and kind of go back behind the membership doors and have sort of these neat collaboration spaces there, and like little booths and places where you could set up and work if you wanted to, or you could have a dedicated space if you wanted to pay a little higher rent, for those things. Having those options was really neat. But then the online community piece of it felt a little rocky to me. It felt, and as somebody that works in this space, I was trying to help or advise them a little bit about how to make that, a more connected, sort of experience. So it's so gratifying to see that somebody that's been in this co-working shared space, kind of environment for some years is not, is also paying attention to like, how this comes together. I'm wondering if that's has become more to the fore since the pandemic. I kind of would expect, because I know that a lot of co-working spaces suffered as soon as the
Yeah.
pandemic hit, right?
I mean, definitely, I think like a lot in business, like it's the pain that they suffer that made them realize what probably you've been preaching for a long time, and even myself before that, we were like, because when you travel and you go from one place to another, you want to still be connected when you're not physically there. So that's when you start to see the power of digital, right? And so, like, yes, the pain of the pandemic makes that they're searching for like new ways of keeping the contact with the with the community or so on. But again, I think it's like the prop tech industry that now is also more mature, that is offering more affordable solutions, making it more accessible, being more creative. Because you have to understand as well, like a landlord or maybe someone that is an operator of a co-working, that might not be their expertise, right? They might be really good at hosting or doing the physical component, and real estate, it has a lot to like change. It's still a very traditional industry. So to have startup world coming, the tech community bringing and letting them know that we can do different things, it's exciting, but it takes time, right? It's not from one day to another that we're going to shift physical spaces. But yeah.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. Well, so do you have any thoughts about trends or predictions for the year ahead in the community world?
Um, I mean, I think I've seen a lot of now. Like, we talk a lot about co-working today, but like co-living seems to be also like a top of mind of a lot of people, because since we're blending more like work and lifestyle, and people are maybe not living now only in the main cities. So urbanization is changing a little bit, and we're seeing like other offerings that are being developed. So I think that's interesting to see what happens in that space, in terms of building not only community, but like just learning to live with one another. And then in general, I think the trend hopefully is that we're going to get, and I think you're doing a lot of work on that, of getting more data that helps to support the seriousness of the profession, and that it's not only happening online. So as like physical events pick up, I think we'll have more and more data that shows the importance that is doing an impact of the big pandemic of feeling lonely that people are having, that how meeting in person makes a big difference. So I think it's looking shining for community professionals. But yeah, what about yourself?
Well, we didn't rehearse this, but that leads into actually a blog piece that I'm going to be publishing pretty soon on the Clock Tower Advisors website, clocktoweradvisors.com. I actually did a roundup. My colleague Deb Shell and I reached out to some of our close collaborators that we work with to get some of their opinions about some of the upcoming trends that are happening, or things that we've seen happening in the space over the past year in particular, and sort of where we maybe kind of think things are going. I alluded a little bit to some of the things I'm excited about to see some of the technology innovation that's happening in the space. I think there are some community platform wars that are happening right now with a lot of the startups that kind of bubbled up during Web3 as alternatives to Discord. I think that there continues to be some pretty strong and increasing interest from enterprise organizations to try to be a little bit more community-led in their approach. I think sort of the diversification of roles within community has been interesting. Community operations kinds of roles, as well as some of the diversification of software, things like Common Room or Communify, and things that are coming out of sort of specialty platforms to help the community professional do their job a little bit better online. So we'll have a preview for some of those things, and hopefully that's something we'll be adding to year after year with Clock Tower as I try to grow that organization going forward. But it's been a really good year. I think that there's been a lot of growth and a lot of maturity that's been developing in the space. So I'm looking forward to more as we go. Marta, I want to be respectful of your time and let you get back to your day here. Thank you for being so generous and sharing your experiences and things that you've done. If somebody wants to learn a little bit more about Ground In, where can they go? How's a good way to get in touch with you?
Yeah, so they can go into the website groundin.world. They can contact me directly, also on LinkedIn. I think that the best place right now to reach out is on LinkedIn. I'll DM, I'll contact directly. I'll also put now like a calendar link so you can book some one-on-one sessions, and yeah.
Marvelous. Well, I look forward to hearing more about your adventures in the future. I hope you decide to come back to the show at some point. We really like that. And then just upcoming, I'll just kind of mention some upcoming sessions that we've got here on the Talk About Your Community show. The next session is going to be Friday, December the 16th. And it's going to be thoughts on talent communities, what you need to know. And it's going to be my friend and my colleague, the dear Ilker Akansel, who's based out of Turkey. Ilker is an amazing guy. And, Marta, I don't know if you've met him, but
yes, fantastic.
He's a fantastic gentleman.
Yeah.
One of the warmest people in our space that I know of. He and I have been collaborating on this project called Talent Led, which is going to be a new entrepreneurial effort for the two of us. It might be crazy for taking on something new, but we're both passionate about this idea about using community spaces to more fully engage talent for organizations over time. And having come out of WeWork, that's probably something that appeals to you as well. Yeah. That we're thinking about ways that the online community as a platform is something that can engage prospective candidates, current employees, and past employees as a more comprehensive kind of strategy to talent engagement. So join us for that. It's going to be Friday, December the 16th at 10 a.m. U.S. Central Time. It'll be getting into evening on the European continent there. But hopefully you'll be able to join us for that. And then we'll be offline for the holidays. There won't be something taking place the week of Christmas, between Christmas and New Year's, but we will be back on January the 13th for our regular slate of shows. And we have guests booked out through, I think, March, thanks to the capable effort of my engineer and scheduler, Kalisa Nickel, who is off stage here right now, cheering us on and making sure everything goes smoothly. Many thanks to her. And if I talk about things that were grateful changes for this year, Kalisa is definitely one of them. Deb Shell is another. And then meeting wonderful people like you, Marta. Again, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me in the show. It's been a total pleasure, and I do hope that we'll come back and definitely stay in touch and continue helping each other.
Absolutely. So I will say to you, happy holidays, and hope to see you in the new year. And to all of you who tuned in, thank you so much. If you happen to tune in on the replay of this, we're watching closely for any kinds of comments or questions that come up, and we'll be pretty quick to answer them. And of course, this stream will be archived up on YouTube as well. And so if you happen to encounter this on YouTube, we very much appreciate subscribes and likes. It's a personal goal of mine to get to 100 subscribers by maybe January, February next year. That'd be nice. I think we're sitting around 63 right now. So any help you can give me on that front, I'm really grateful for. In the meantime, take care of yourselves this weekend. You are worth the time to take care of yourself so you can take care of others. And we will see you again here in 2 weeks. Take care, everybody.